Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. Hi. You can stay seated, it's okay. Okay, so my name's Graeme Abrahams. I'm going to be, this session is going to be like an hour, and then we're going to have a break, and then there's going to be another hour. Okay, so and I've got the after lunch crowd, so, no falling asleep or whatever, right? So yeah, this is the Incident Management, Preparedness and Response Workshop. We've done this a few times, so if you've been here before, you're going to hear the same tired old jokes from me and things, so you can still laugh at them. Yeah, so I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm Graeme Abrahams. I'm at the Centre of Excellence at the provincial government. 20 years of experience in IT, cybersecurity, project management, IT solutions, etc. Most of my time has been in the health sector and also in the hospital sector. So when it comes to incident management, I'm not sure if people have been to hospitals, if they've had children or whatever. They're very good at incident management. There's code blue, code red, code all these, right? So got a good kind of little bit of a pedigree working in operations from the government, from the hospital. Yes, so I've been with the province for the last couple of years. And so this is really excellent. I mean, like I say, I've done this presentation a couple of times before. It seems to be getting pretty popular. So anyway, I keep getting invited back. Okay, so there's the agenda for today. Just going to go over some cybersecurity incident response planning, the maturity model. Sorry, everyone's got their slides there. They can make notes, etc. Incident scenarios, tabletop exercise planning, recommended resources, and appendix. Upon the completion of this workshop, hopefully, where people have come from. Oh, you didn't get one? I think we've got a couple more. All right, okay. We will have more. If you don't get one, we'll get one. Okay. I think we got a little bit more people than we thought. Yeah, so a greater understanding of your organization's level of preparedness. So I'm not sure what role you may be playing in cybersecurity in your organization, but you'll come out with a better understanding of what that preparedness is. And maybe the ability to understand the current state of your organization's incident response capabilities, understand the incident scenarios, and the ability to test incident scenarios and developing tabletop exercises. There's another one here that I don't put on here, and I want to leave you a little bit nervous regarding going back to your organizations, that we really need to be prepared for cybersecurity incidents. Okay, so for people who are in the cybersecurity field, this is not going to be new to you, but essentially this is basically cybersecurity is the protection of digital information and the infrastructure that it resides, right? As opposed to the protection of information in all forms like paper and different formats, which is information security, right? So we're cybersecurity. And that includes technology, processes, and people. Now, I think what's important here is that most people think about cybersecurity, they concentrate too much on the technology of it. And that's where, typically it came from an IT background, and then you're a specialist there. And also, I mean, with this being women in security, obviously, a lot of IT in the past was, I call them, now they're pale and stale, right? They're white and they're older, but now it's a whole new community. And I'm going to go into the reasons why it's so important now that we have a whole umbrella of different inputs into cybersecurity. So that's why it's technologies, processes, and people. Yep. And then, obviously, the objectives of it, confidentiality, is the protection of the information, right? So that's like from unauthorized access and disclosure, right? So that's an objective of cybersecurity. The integrity, so just making sure that the information that you're trying to protect remains valid. If not, then it becomes useless, right? So I came from the hospital sector. Obviously, that integrity of that information is paramount, right? And then obviously the availability. So ensures a timely and reliable access to that information. So availability, if someone brings a website down or something like that, becomes unavailable, right? If they lock you out of a computer, you're unavailable, right? So they're the three, and they call it the CIA triad triangle. Any questions on that?
How do you find the right balance between them?
Well, it's not necessarily a balance. They're key objectives that you need to actually you need to implement, right? They do cover a lot of different areas, and then when I go through a couple more slides here, you will see the areas, and we did have an expert panel, which I'm going to talk about, where they did cover all the different areas. And when you look at all those different areas, you'll see that CIA applies to all of them, right? So it's actually, you can't make one or the other, but it's a good question, because what are your priorities? Because a lot of it comes down to priorities of money and budget, right? And so I'll talk a little bit about that and where you should be putting your key resources in an organization, right? Because there's lots of bells and whistles that you can do in cybersecurity, and there's a lot of vendors who'll come and say they can actually cure all your ills, but they can't, right? So yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that. Thanks. Okay, so the expert panel. So this was established in 2020 for a 2-year mandate. And I'm really pleased to have the chairperson of the expert panel here, Robert Wong. I don't know if you'd just give a wave there, Robert, because they did some fantastic work over 2 years. So they brought together, yeah. Excellent. Yeah, they brought, so the provincial government brought together like 10 experts in their fields, executives and operational people from a variety of backgrounds, and they were asked in their mandate to provide recommendations to increase the resilience of the cybersecurity posture of the broader public sector, right? So they set about doing their work, and they basically broke up into 4 different subcommittees. And so each one of those subcommittees was made up of 4 members, so to speak, 3 or 4 members. And they spent basically 18 months working on recommendations. So they would be doing research, they would be doing discussions, and then they came up with the recommendations, right? So, so the final report, there was an interim report which came out in 2021. So Robert said we really need to get something out a year early here, because we're seeing things and trends where we can actually say to the broader public sector, you need to be doing these things in the meantime before we're coming out with these recommendations. And this interim report was published in April 2021, and basically a couple of themes there was that all organizations should be doing education and training and awareness in cybersecurity to all their staff. And then 2 is that the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is basically the de facto kind of framework for cybersecurity, that's what we should be adopting and following over the broader public sector, right? So they were in the interim report. And then the final report was published only last October, so it's not that far off, right? It's not getting dusty on the shelf anywhere now. And that contained 20 recommendations. I just want to make sure I'm getting this. So I just want to go over. So with a governance and operating model, so governance, and Robert was overall chairperson, but he was specifically very interested in the overall governance, that organizations should have accountability and processes and standards in place, and people who are accountable for doing these things and following certain frameworks and having a risk management strategy, that these should be in place, right, in organizations. It's absolutely paramount, because that sets the foundational basis. So there was 20 recommendations, and they covered these 4 themes: communications and stakeholder. So with a governance and operating model, they were basically saying, we should make sure that people have playbooks, we have incident response planning, these things should be in place. There was a lot of other recommendations that they made, but for the purposes of this presentation, that was it from the governance and operating model. communication as a stakeholder, we need to better communicate. We need to, when we get through in a few slides, we'll talk of who our adversary is, right? We're better together, right, rather than individual, because it's just like being preyed on, right? They're just going to pick out from a herd, but the herd stays together and communicates, shares information. Those channels of communication are established. You've got a better chance for what we call the IOCs, in the cases of compromise being shared and things like that. And then like that goes through with education and training, and then shared services and resources also talks about you should be having tabletop exercises. We should be planning for when these events are going to be happening. So this final report, the interim report, etc., is available, cybersecurity.ontario.ca. Just look under the left-hand menu. You don't have to log in, you should become a member, but on the left-hand menu, you'll see expert panel, and it'll show the bios of all the expert panel and the final report and interim report. I really recommend you go into that, because that really just is showing, if you're from the broader public sector, the framework and the roadmap about where things are going over the next little while. So you can get ahead of the game and be aware of that, and if you can talk about that in your meetings, yeah, it'll look good. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay, all right, so now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this. Yeah, sorry, question?
I did have a question about the previous slide. Where can we find examples of the reports?
You can find the actual report with all the recommendations at cybersecurity.ontario.ca. You just go on there, you go on after, if you want to come in the break, you just go with there and you can see it. Yeah, because it's a wealth of other information on there as well, which I'll be going over. Okay, so incident management, what is it? This is the purpose why we're here. Okay, so it's the process is used by cybersecurity IT professionals to identify and respond to incidents in their organization. Obviously, cybersecurity incidents and events within the organization. Now, it can be anything from a server outage, data breach, something as simple as an employee misconfiguring a firewall, right? So I just took this image from the internet. I mean, whatever it is you're going into now, it's getting worse than you ever thought, right? I've just got a couple of things here that, by 2025, the cost of cybercrime is going to be $6 trillion. That's in 2 years. I mean, we're talking not billions, we're talking trillions here now. And that 60% of cybersecurity organizations say they're understaffed in cybersecurity. So that's a real incentive for people in the cybersecurity industry, that there's a little bit of job security there. And that 95% of the incidents are human error, right? So that's with phishing and things like that, right? I mean, so it's a problem we have. It's getting worse. And, I mean, it just happens all the time, right? So me, for example, I was using a password manager called LastPass for my personal use, and that got breached last year. So I kind of looked at it because I'm a little bit in the know when I can read stuff regarding, being involved. I thought, this doesn't look good, right? So I actually just exported all my passwords out of there because it looked really bad, right? And then I went to another password manager. As soon as I did that, then I have a couple of websites. Then GoDaddy got breached, right? So then I've got GoDaddy, right? So I'm like, which way am I turning here? It doesn't matter where you're turning. Something's happening all the time, right? So it's just like it's just industrial scale. It's just you cannot get away from it, right? Okay. So I put this slide together. So here, I mean, from the cyber criminal, we always thought that it was this lone wolf person, sitting there doing all the work, used to call them kiddie scripters and things like that, right? That is not what it is now. If you think this is where we are here, you need to get some education, because this is where we are now. We are in an industrial scale regarding incident management. These ransomware gangs, they're selling, it's doing as a service. They're an organization. They're doing, if you think of an office where there's separation of duties, that's how they work. You know, then these may be remote people. One person may not even know the other person, right? They're specialized in the roles that they are doing now, right? So these are the roles. So you have this initial access broker. So this is a person you can think that this is the social engineer. They're all there good, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're looking at how we can get credentials and get access to an organization, right? That's all their purpose is. Because when they get that access, then they can sell that access on the dark web. And this is where all the, like those early transactions are being done, right? Now, though that can be monetized. It can be like a few dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the organization, right? And it also could have happened maybe a year before, so you don't know those credentials. But that is their sole job. So then the affiliate basically would buy that access, and their sole job then is to do what we call like enumeration of the network. So they go into the network, and then they start finding where all the crown jewels are, where all your key assets are. And they have playbooks for this. They have playbooks, so they can actually, they can do searches on keywords, like incident management playbook. They can do insurance and things like that. They look out and find where all the key information is. So, and then they can also deploy some of the ransomware to that organization as well, right? Then we move on to where the data manager, right? So these are the specialists. These are the ones who, they set up websites, external, remote websites, and they can extract the information, right? So back in the day, you used to have like things like WannaCry back in 2017. They would just lock your computer and then say, hold that for ransom, right? But then we soon realized it's a cat and mouse game that, okay, well, we're going to do backups. We're going to make those backups really good, right? So now they said, okay, then, so that now we need to exfiltrate the data because we want to hold that ransom, right? So that's what they do. They'll exfiltrate that information. So that backups are pretty useless, right? Because we've got your information, and if it's PHI information, which is the most expensive, then they've got you, right? And then they'll provide you, copies of that information back to say, look, this is what we have. So that's what they do. They'll do that, the privilege escalation. That means that they'll get from initial access, and then they'll try and get to higher access into the technical infrastructure, which will have access to more of the information, right? So that's what they do. So then the data manager, they're dealing with all the publication of the information, right? So they're the ones who will maybe send copies back to the it's now noted that now you have a problem, right? So we'll be saying, they're doing that. Okay, so this is the information that we have, right? The operator, they're the ones who've set up the infrastructure outside of the organization. It's hidden. It's very hard to find where they're keeping that information. Now the negotiator comes in, and they're the ones who negotiate with the organization. That is a very specialized role. These people may not even know each other, right? And I'll tell you one of the reasons that this was my own theory, but I think there was a recent one at Sick Kids, right? Does everyone remember that one, right? So that was definitely one of a setup like this, in my opinion, because they'd already infiltrated, they'd already taken the data, they'd already locked it out, and then suddenly they say, sorry we did this, because it's a children's hospital. We don't do children's hospitals. So it just shows that these guys further down here, basically the accountant didn't know who these guys were, right? Because they'd done all their job until it came to the accountant, who really is the money man, who's dealing with the money and being able to take the money and distribute it, but also really is probably the main person who's actually dealing with the end product, because he's the one who will be paying out these different people. So when it came to the chaser or the accountant, they said, children's hospital, we don't do that. I mean, like, I don't know about the morals. I mean, when they say it's not a children's hospital, yeah, they've just done a vaccination clinic last year. I mean, like, so they're doing a children's hospital this year. Anyway, so that's how I think this was that setup. So that's what I mean when it comes to the chaser. Now, the chaser is a particular kind of skill set, because what they do is that they are probably working closely with a negotiator, in that they can put extra pressure on an organization to pay up. And what I mean by that is that you have extortion. So that's basically where you have your computer locked out. Right. Now, pay us and we'll unlock it. We'll send you the decryptor keys. Then you have double extortion, that's when we've exfiltrated your data out. Right. So now we've got your data. We're going to publish that. That's called double extortion. Now we have what we call triple extortion. And that means that we've taken your data, and some of that data may be personal health information or very sensitive corporate information, and we're going to publicize that on a website. Right. So they basically intensify the pressure that they put on an organization. And they're very good at it. That's all they do all day. So they're very good. So it doesn't matter. I mean, this is why when it comes to a breach in an organization, it's probably best to get a breach coach in through your insurance or something like that, because they know how to deal with these people. We don't know how to deal with them unless that is you're a negotiator. You could, a CIO, a CISO, or whatever, they may not be a negotiator. Leave it up to the professionals. So that is where we are now, and that is on an industrial scale. And it works so well. There was I'm just trying to find if I have it here. There was a gang that gave up, basically retired in 2018. I'm trying to remember the name of it, because they'd made $2 billion. So they just said, forget it. Oh, I know, yeah, it's terrible. I know, it was even before Bitcoin went down. I mean, it's not as if he didn't even get, but I know they could have got a bit after by Bitcoin. But yeah, they made $2 billion, so they said that's it. So they basically sold this ransomware as a service model to all the ones you're pretty much what you're seeing now. And so what's made it a lot easier even now, you can still, even that model, one person can kind of do it, because you can buy these ransomware kits on the dark web for hardly any money. And so you could try and do it. You could try and, start doing malicious code and all this, and phishing people and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know the full answer, but I know that what we need to be is prepared for it, right? Okay, so this is just something regarding, the average cost of a data breach, $7 million. And you might think, oh, well, that's really high, right? But until you've been breached, I come from a background in operations. I know what happens when infrastructure goes down, and how long and the effort and time and everything it takes to bring something back up. When it comes to a breach, we have this incident cost framework, which is available, cybersecurity.ontario.ca, and you can actually go through that. You can go through a spreadsheet. So I really recommend that you actually go and have a look on that spreadsheet, and it will itemize. And you can put some dollar figures, number of hours, number of staff, how much, what they're earning, this, that, and the other, and you'll be really surprised at that figure, what that breach is, right? So You can imagine, like, people are generally have a full day. You get a breach, and it's all additional, right?
Why do the Canadian companies pay more than the rest of the world? Can we just do something nice?
I don't know. Maybe they got the. Maybe they're paying in Canadian, we're paying in US. I don't know. All amounts in Canadian dollars. No, it's a good question. Get to the back of the class. Okay, is this not working? See what you've done? Yeah, okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so what we're going to talk about next is incident response planning and some of the different phases that we've got to go through, right? To come up with some of our incident response plans, etc. Huh? I've been breached. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Nice one. Yeah. Yeah, so I really so NIST is a very good cybersecurity framework. It's kind of like accepted worldwide as like the de facto one. There's different ones, and we'll go into a little bit later. Yeah, that's way. Yeah, I think that's it. We'll go into it later, but NIST really is the one. There's good reasons why NIST was adopted by the expert panel and recommended by them. But anyway, so this is really, even from a NIST perspective, these are some of the phases that you go through. So obviously you've got like the preparation, and then this is like you've got the key thing here regarding the publications. It's NIST standard 800-61. So basically, and someone you asked a question before about, where do you put your dollars and stuff like that, right? So I always remember from well, not too many years ago, listening to a CISO, and then she was saying that you've got like 3 or 4 things you need to do in an organization. One, main thing you need to do is you need to understand where your critical assets are. You need to understand where your crown jewels are. You need to have that asset inventory. Doesn't matter what framework you have. Number 1 and number 2 is a hardware and software inventory of your assets, right? You've got to know what we're trying to protect. Secondly, you need to be scanning and doing like vulnerability management regarding understanding what is happening. Are we getting attacked, and what are the vulnerabilities of these, and how we can get breached regarding those. Third, you need to have an incident response plan. For when it does happen, what you're going to do when that happens, right? She said, it might be pretty basic. She said everything else is gravy when it comes to an organization. She said because what happens is that it goes like this regarding funding in an organization. And Life Labs a few years ago, they got breached, right? After they got breached, then they got $50 million to do a program, right? And they ended up like it was the CISO of the year, everything like this, they got after 2 years because they had all that money, right? And then what this CISO what she was saying is that after a little while it goes down again. And so then, that initial kind of short-term memory, medium-term memory is that they don't keep up with that program until it happens again, and it goes back up again. She said it'd be good to understand what, it's always like you wish you knew what you knew yesterday, right? If I only had have known, I'd have done it. And it's actually just getting to that now regarding incident management. And that's why I like the expert panel. And now incident management, it's definitely an area which people should be going in. because there's a lot of work which is going to be available in that, is getting companies prepared for it, right? So so that's number one, knowing your assets. That's your preparation work that you need to do. Understand that, and then follow kind of like a methodology regarding that, making sure that you have policies in place, that you plan, and then you have procedures in place regarding all those things. Okay, I'm just going to put this down here because it's my work one. Okay, steps to ensure that you're prepared for an incident. Understanding, you've got to understand the DNA of your organization. You've got to understand where things are, where your critical assets are, and then what you're going to have in place. Detection and analysis, what are your activities regarding that? You know, what you're going to do if something does actually get breached. What's the scope of that, of your response regarding something? And then obviously your response, you know, what's your reaction to a cyber incident? What, are you bringing third parties in? Do you have cyber insurance? All those things. These are the main kind of definitions of things you should be doing. We're here now, right? We're going to go a little bit deeper. So, right, okay, let's plan for the incident response life cycle, right? So like we talked before, governance, priority one, and your team selection, right? One of the first things is, why don't you create a policy in your organization that says this is what we're doing. Part of our policy in the organization is that we have an incident response plan in place, right? That is not only signed off by the executive, because once it's signed off, then that's what you should be doing, right? So have that in place, and then have organized roles and responsibilities of the teams. What's going to happen in the event of an incident? After the event has happened, right? Like I said, I come from the hospital sector, so we have, you know, code blue, code red. There's a whole code white. You know, for cybersecurity, it's code grey, right? So in code grey, we know exactly what we're doing in that. So that's what you'll sometimes see on organizations, especially in public sector, if they've been hit, they've got a code grey situation. So that's what happens. That's what I mean, communicate the plan regarding what it is. That's the buy-in. That's where it goes back, having an IT policy, having roles and responsibilities, getting the buy-in, making sure it's part of your organizational goal. It's not an IT issue now, it's a business issue. You've seen how things can get affected. It can bring an organization down and kill it, right? And then use cybersecurity insurance and third parties. We're no one professional now. You look back at that model. No, are you capable of dealing with these people by yourself? I don't think so. Some people may, but cyber insurance, that's what they do. They'll cover they cover some of the supports that will come in, breach coaches, forensic teams, all those people that can come in and hit the ground running once something happens. Because remember, during a breach, it's absolute chaos. Once you find out, it's like getting your house burgled, right? It's like, oh, you've been like violated, and it's, you know, and then, you know, it's just absolutely terrible. So you need some people who come in with that calm kind of like, okay, we know this is what we do, and then they can start taking over some of the stuff. All right. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So if some organization is like trying to put together an incident response plan from the scratch, what are some good resources to have some building blocks?
Chat GPT. I don't know. I'm not kidding. Just put it in there. Like, what the building blocks of it? Yeah, they'll get it. I know. It's funny. I've just come back from England, right, yesterday. So I'm on English time at the moment. But I was a good friend of mine from when I was younger. He's a CEO of a not-for-profit. He's got a museum, he's got a park and things like this that he's overseeing. He's got 48 staff and that. So we're just on the train coming home, and I'm like, okay. So I said, Dave, like, you know, do you know about Chat GPT? He's like, no, not really, I don't know anything about it. So I said, well, let me introduce it to you. he couldn't believe it, like what I was showing him about his own organization, not his organization, but how he can become more efficient. One of the things that, I'll digress here, right? So one of the things, he puts concerts on, open air concerts, as part of some of the things he does. And he always gets complaints from neighbors, like from the general public about the sound of like whatever, right? So he said, that's an issue I'm dealing with at the moment. So I said, okay, so let's have a look at what ChatGPT says. So I just put in, I said like, please describe in bullet points the efforts you can make to suppress noise in an outside concert event, whatever. And it came back 12 points. He's like, what? He goes, well, he said I'm doing 10 of those. And I've got 2 that I'm not doing. But he was blown away by it. But now he says, I now know the other 2. So ChatGPT, I like it, but it validates your own information if you understand it, right? Anyway, okay. Yeah, so starting off with it, there's lots of places, it's lots of research. As I say, understanding, if you're going to be starting, don't try and boil the ocean. Look at critical assets, what we're trying to protect here. What can I take to protect those? What's it needed? It's all about, it's a risk management approach. That was part of what the governance and operating model subcommittee was saying, and what Robert was saying. It's a risk management approach, right? You know, you're not going to spend all this money protecting something down here that's cost nothing, right? It's got to be a risk management approach to it. So then, yeah, also scenario-based planning, right? So start off with a couple of scenarios. You know, like ransomware is always a good one to start off with. What happens if we get hit with ransomware? And then, so, you know, start off with just doing one, right? But also identifying your vulnerabilities and critical assets. I'll keep repeating that, but it's just so crucial. And then your 2 or 3 likely scenarios. You know, stolen laptop. What happens if we lose stolen laptop with information on it? You know, what happens if we have ransomware? You know, what happens if the website goes down? All these are different scenarios. You know, I put added value complete 10, right? And then who does what within those? Right? Sorry. Okay, important is create a communication strategy, right? So part of what we do now, nothing is in paper anymore, except my notes here, right? So one of the things you have is like what we used to have is called a grab and go bag. That means that, like, one of the things we used to have in the hospital, we used to have somebody each, because I was at Mount Sinai, and then, well, I was covered both. I covered Bridgepoint and Mount Sinai. But in each one of those hospitals, because they kind of came together, they still had separate processes, they would have a person who was responsible for should any event happen, right? And that doesn't just mean cyber, but they would be the person who'd be contacted. They had a grab-and-go bag. They had a separate iPhone which was off the network. That iPhone and some of the paper had lists of people they needed to contact. Now, who do you need to contact? You need to contact the team. You need to have the alternate kind of phone numbers, etc. How you're going to get in contact with them. You need third-party suppliers. Who's your insurance person? The list goes on, right? All depending on what do I need, because those, it's like first 48 hours in the COP thing, right? A lot of it is very important in the first hours, because one, it could be getting worse, that scenario, because part of what it is that you need to contain that scenario, you need to contain that breach. So having a really good communication strategy, and that also means in a bigger public organization, having draft media communications out there, right? I mean, who wants to start off with a piece of paper, right? I mean, again, well, you can go to ChatGPT, right? Training your team, and then also, so that's the accountability, having those people in place so that they know. And it's important also that you do cross-train on those team members as well, so that they do understand at least one other role within that. I mean, obviously, if you've got the luxury of a large organization with lots of people, then, you know, you could be doing one specific role. However, often not the case, right? Because everyone's under kind of constraints, especially in the public sector, regarding budgets and things like that. So you could have someone doing multiple roles. Test the plan. Okay, so that's really important, right? Once you have the plan, is to test it. Keep kicking that. Now, there's just a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, they used to end up with a paper plan, right? And then so you take that off the shelf, you know, dust it off, make sure you do it once a year, and then that was okay. If anyone's done their CISM exam, it used to be, how often do you test your plan? It's like minimum 12 months or as necessary. That's the answer, right? So, but now we've got a lot of things now where, because incident management is so critical now, right? We've really advanced, and so we have more gamification regarding that. We can be testing people. You can be doing micro TTXs, right? It's not this big thing where you're bringing everybody together and doing it. You can actually just be doing like one person, right? This is your role. I'm going to be testing you on a regular basis regarding that role. So there's a lot of learning software that's going out there now. I find that it's so exciting, that area right now, and it's really, really growing. And like I say, there's that conducting the annual review.
So this annual review would be conducted based on the incident that happens in the organization, and the criticality, based on the criticality, or it is for every incident we try to do and review the annual report once again, like redo the assessment once again.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you always update your plan based on something that may happen, right? Because you're always going to learn. Why you do tabletop exercises, it's not to point fingers at people, and that is to identify gaps within your plan. That's why you do it. That's why you should be doing it. It's a very, I don't know the word, it's not confrontational when you're bringing people together. It's understanding that. It's like training. It's like doing anything. You know, it's sport or something else. You train like you should be. This is what happens when it happens. And so when it happens, you're ready, right? And then you're always going to find these gaps. What's the beauty of our profession is that cybersecurity is changing every single day, right? It's evolving. Okay, all right. We're going to have a break in 5 minutes, okay? So I don't know if people have seen this. It's Abraham Wald, and it's so... anyway, very quickly. So during the Second World War, being a pilot or a crew member of like fighter planes or anything, or bombers in the Second World War is pretty much like a death sentence. There was the death rate was as bad as people in the trenches in the First World War. It was that bad, right? So anyway, so they had very good data, the military. They knew how many planes they sent out and how many planes were coming back, right? Well, wasn't that many that were coming back. But what they did know was that they knew where the planes coming back, where the bullets were, or where they were getting hit. So the military, in their military intelligence may be an oxymoron, but I think it doesn't, right? But they were saying, oh, that's good. We know where all the bullets, we know where all this is happening. What we'll do, we'll reinforce those areas. Anyway, they brought a statistician in. They brought somebody who's nothing to do with the military. He was called Abraham Wald. And he said, no. He said, the ones that are coming back are the ones that have survived. The ones that we lost, basically ones that we lost, that's the opposite of what we should be doing. That's where we should be protecting, right? So there are a couple of lessons there and from cybersecurity, and that is always use a risk management approach to cybersecurity. Understand what your critical assets are regarding what you should be protecting, right? And understand that, know what your environment is, your DNA, everything about your organization, and then understand that. Because in that, I've got the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter about some of the other stuff. It's what really matters to your organization, what's aligned with your organizational goals, your mission, etc. And the second big one is, and that's very much regarding this, the whole conference that we're having here now, is diversity is so important. Bringing in other minds to a problem. You can't have just the pale and stale guy here trying to figure out what your IT and cybersecurity should be. No. You've got to bring in all the different teams, all the different ways you look at something. You've got to I'm reading a book now called by Bruce Schneier. He's called the godfather of cybersecurity. It's called The Hacker's Mind. And he was talking about hacking. Hacking is people finding loopholes in a system. Now, that system is not always a IT system. It could be a tax system. It could be a one-armed bandit. It could be anything. It's finding the loophole against what that purpose is. And no system is 100%. There's always going to be loopholes. How do you address those loopholes? We're really running out of time for this session, but I'm going to leave you with in there. There's a self-assessment for your organization. We're not collecting them after, so just you can fill it out and just take a few minutes and assess your own organizations, how you feel that if you know where you are regarding that. And then this is usually we have a smaller group. I may ask you a few questions, right? I'm going to pick on you because you asked me that question before. Enjoy your break. And then you get an idea where your maturity is as an organization. Okay, so I'll see you in half an hour. Okay, welcome back. Thanks for the people who came back. And apparently I'm up against ChatGPT. So even I'm getting made redundant here by it, right? So anyway, I just want to pick up where we left off, and I'm not sure if anybody had a chance just to kind of run through some of that self-assessment for their organization. I'm not sure if there's anybody who wants to maybe just mention anything about that. But basically, it's just for yourself. You can take it back within your organization, and then you can basically see where you are, because these are like the 5 steps. Now, from a maturity perspective, it doesn't really matter whether it's cybersecurity. My stock trade was project management. So I used to be in the senior leaders project management forum. And then we used to talk about project management maturity, right? Very similar. You start off where it's very initial, where you don't have really anything in place. Then you have some processes in place where they're repeatable. When then third step is more defined, managed, and then there's optimization. That's like, nirvana when you're up there. Within project management, most people were very open about it. We were like between 2 and 3, right? So that's probably where you're probably going to find a lot of organizations. Given the threats involved regarding incident management, you should be really at the 3 and hopefully getting maybe to the 4 on that one. Okay, so things you can take back if you're not a decision maker within your organization. It's good for your own education. You may be a decision maker in the future. These are just a checklist, right? We don't really need to go through it all, but what we talked about before was having, do you have roles assigned to people? Is there an incident management plan in place? Is it communicated? And then at these contact lists, remember I talked about the grab bag and things like that. What tools and contingency systems, software, what backups do you have? Things like that. Reporting forms, communications channels verified, and then recovery procedures defined in the required tools, etc. So they're just all kind of steps. If you can go through there, I mean, whoever's responsible for your incident management, they should be able to really go through that and say yes, yes, no, no, and understand where those gaps are. And that's really what you're doing when you're looking at that self-assessment, because it's like anything. You're doing your as-is. That's my as-is. This is where I am. You're looking at, from a risk-based approach, you're looking at where your risk appetite is and things like that, where you want to be. And then in the middle, that's your gaps, right? That's your gap. That's the gap analysis that you're doing. That's what your roadmap is, right? So when you're presenting that, that is your roadmap, right? So this is what we should be doing from getting here to here, you know, and then you can, that roadmap can be like 1, 2, 3, 5 years. So just on that point of like roadmaps, etc. So there's always a business case to be made about cybersecurity solutions, right? So when I was in the hospital, hospitals, like $1 spent on infrastructure and cybersecurity is $1 taken away from patient care, right? It's as simple as that, right? Because we're publicly funded, so it's publicly funded money. So where do you get the most bang for your buck, politically, whatever, reputationally, is when you spend it on patients. That's what you're there for. That's your organizational goal. So my experience, it was all a bit of a challenge, trying to make the business case for cybersecurity tools, staff, and things like that, right? So this is, I'm not sure if you've ever done project management, it's this triangle. It's called the triangle of compromise. And so there's scope, and that's really the features and functions that you need, that you want to implement, how quickly you want those to implement those things, and then the resources and budget that you have. And you can play about this with yourself, but it's like pick any two, right? That's how you're looking at a business case, right? So you want something, I need something really quickly, and I need to make it a really good tool. It's probably going to be expensive, right? I want something fast, but it's going for cheap. It's probably going to be low quality. It's not maybe totally fit for purpose. And then if you go, you go for quality and you want that implementation, you want it great, but it's cheap, it's probably going to be implemented over a long time. So that's just kind of like what we call the triangle of compromise. You can use that in all different ways. When you're talking to management, you're making a business case. When it comes to your options analysis, that you're presenting, those are the things that you're talking about, right? You want it quick, it's going to cost you, right? You want it slow? Okay, we can probably do it cheaper, right? Okay, so just key components again. So the review of risk management and security. So we talked about risk management. It's a risk-based approach to stuff. Your energies and your resources are based on your most critical vulnerabilities. You've got to do that initial risk management regarding your what. Great. I don't know about what happened there. Anyway, so these are just key components: your incident response plan development, key roles and responsibilities, cybersecurity operations, processes. So when I was in the hospital, I made sure that we had processes in place. That included incident response processes in place, and they were documented out. Right? Everyone knew what they were doing on a daily, weekly, monthly, 6 monthly, or after a year. Right? It just helps. Because when you have these things, because you can't make processes people-centric, right? Because people leave and move in organizations. You've got to have something which someone can pick up and take over, and that's exactly the same for incident management. And then critically, I mean, I know I've only talked about kind of cyber insurance very briefly, but cyber insurance is such a field, it's a fascinating field now, really, in that it's becoming kind of increasingly harder to get, but also increasingly crucial to have. So you've got that balance, right? So the insurance companies are hemorrhaging when it comes to money because there's so many breaches. So they're raising their standards of the entry into getting insurance, making sure you have certain things in place. I can probably think back 5 years ago, multi-factor authentication wasn't a critical one. Now that's just run of the mill. You've got to have certain critical multi-factor authentication in place for your critical assets. There's no way. If you don't have that, it's just accident waiting to happen, and you're probably not going to get insured. But from a expert panel perspective, they did say from a shared services perspective, maybe we should have some shared services model regarding insurance, and just to make sure that people are covered. Not sure how that may turn out, but cyber insurance, what it does, it will pay for the resources to come in and help you after a breach. And also from an insurance perspective, which is really important here, is that unlike car insurance, which the insurer can't do much about it if you crash your car, they're in their vested interest for you to be doing a good job to stop a cyber attack, right? So they are out there providing you, before a breach or anything, resources and advice and information, right, as part of that. So it's different than a car insurance, right? Their vested interest is for you to have all these things in place and helping you so you don't get a breach, right? So they can be very proactive. So, and the third-party services that come in, we talked about that model before. Unless you're you're a chief negotiator or you're a forensics expert regarding chain of custody regarding evidence and things like that. From an infrastructure perspective, you need to bring these people in. I was very, very surprised. I watched a Fifth Estate, I'm not sure, CBC Fifth Estate program, and it was talks about this Quebec guy who was arrested by the FBI for some cyber crimes or whatever, but they talked about some of the victim organizations, and I was just so surprised about this organization. I think it was in the public sector in the States or something, and there was the two personnel who were there. One was HR and one was, I don't think, it was only a small organization. They were the ones who were negotiating. They were the ones making the decision with these criminals. They ended up paying for sure. They probably ended up paying over, right? They're just not qualified to do it, right? They shouldn't have been doing it. So, and then in the end, they paid for it. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about frameworks, right? So as I say, from the expert panel, their key recommendation from the interim report was that the broader public sector should be adopting the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? So why, right? Well, it's very popular. Well, I'll just go through the rationale here, right? So this is the wheel. That's the wheel over there. That's the framework. So when we talked about it before, like identifying key assets, protecting those key assets, and doing vulnerability management on them, detecting when something happens to those assets, responding to that, and then recovery. It's a simple wheel, and there's a lot of activities within each one of those phases, right? But anyway, the rationale, it's risk-based, right? Now, the NIST 600-81, you can go online, you can see it. It's aligned with international standards. It provides a lexicon of language, which is really, really important, right? Because I know from project management, if I was talking to somebody who wasn't PMI qualified, sometimes they're not talking the same language as me about the phases and certain things and activities that are happening. They may know it in their head and be very, very good at it, but their language is not the same as mine, right? So that's what this does. It provides a common language where we can all talk the same language. It's adaptable. It's actually open source. You can actually adapt it to your own personal organization, right? There's a large, medium, and small adaptation of it. It's got diverse context, and it's advisory as well. So it's very open, it's open source, it provides you, here we go. And there's just been a recent update in that as well, which has been very good. I'm not sure if people subscribe to the community of practice calls. Yeah, okay, so about a couple, 2-3 months ago, we had a guy called Logan in, and he provided a whole update on the next NIST updates. It was very, very good. All those are available, by the way. Sound like a commercial. They're all available, by the way, in a library on cybersecurity.ontario.ca. You can go, we have some great speakers on that. So as I say, this is what the capability is. This is basically from the wheel here, from the cybersecurity framework, the processes and assets that need protection. Doesn't matter which cybersecurity framework you're using, CIS, ISO, whatever. First two, identify your hardware and software inventory. If you don't know what you're protecting, you're off to a bad start, right? Then it's protecting those with the initial safeguards. And implement that detection, implementing the appropriate mechanisms when an incident happens. What triggers the incident response team to start, right? And then how you're responding to it, how you're doing your containment. You know, hopefully by the time you've detected it, then you've been on the phone to either cyber insurance or these third parties, and they're hitting the ground running and helping you out. And then obviously the recovery, right? I meant to look up a book that was absolutely the best book I've ever read. It's called I'll find out, and I'll try and tell you it at the end. I was going to look at it at the break. It gives you a breakdown of all of these in simplest terms with examples, and it's absolutely the best book I've ever read on it. Yeah, so these are the common ones, right? So there's the NIST, there's the ISO. People people don't know about these CIS controls. I think it used to be top 20. I think it's top 18 right now. COBIT, and then there's even from the payment card, anyone from the financial sector, the PCI, right? Data security standards. And really, what I did here, I just gave an example here, right? What we always talk about, identify, which is the first one in the wheel, first phase from the NIST. And then basically, what is it? Asset management, right? Basically understanding all your assets within your organization, right? And then they have the physical, what are the physical assets? What are the software assets that you have? And then what I did here, and this is actually in the appendix. Well, actually, you can just Google that, and it'll show you. It shows you what the corresponding references for all these other ones, right? I mean, it's like, how many, there's lots of different ways to skin a cat. So they're all doing the same thing. They're approaching it in the same thing. There's just a different, different kind of language about how they're doing it, right? So let's check my notes just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I have a question. With the, if you can just go back to the inventory piece, right?
Yeah.
And perhaps this is a little bit of a baseline question. You said physical devices and systems and software. So by that definition, anything that is connected to the internet alone should be inventory, or anything that sits offline could be an asset, like a whiteboard or something. Does that have to be inventory?
Yeah. I mean, organizations I've worked in, from an asset perspective, you're even doing your software library, right? Your hardware library. You're also even some of your, from the hospital, what we did when something came in, a laptop came in, it went through a process, right? And if people have done ITIL before, they know about the CMDB, right? Configuration management database, right? So you're making a change to anything that's coming in, but you've got to add to that, right? So yeah, tables and chairs may not be what you're putting in there, right? But when anything that's coming in, nowadays IoT devices, all those kind of things, they've got to be in there, right? It's such a big job if you've not done it. It's actually starting it off at some time and then carrying it on, and then hopefully going back and doing more of it, right? Because I saw it. I'm not giving secrets away, but I saw it doing very good at one place and not very good at the other, right? One person was totally on top of it, everything they did. Other ones, they weren't. I managed them both. But, yeah, I mean, it's basically, we are talking hardware, software, right? And say don't boil the ocean either. I mean, just put your critical stuff on there, right? All right, so when it comes down to incident scenarios, right? So when I was doing the incident scenarios, we had a list of different incident scenarios. This just shows how things move along, right? And I'm not giving a shout out to the one next door, but improper use of AI chatbot, right? ChatGPT. So about a month ago, help with Josh over there, we developed a ChatGPT tabletop exercise, right? So that we may be using with a client group, a ministry, or whatever. And so basically, you're just going through what happens if people use like ChatGPT wrong, right? I mean, they've already been breached already, right? So we know that. So, and as we are moving forward with AI and these models, right? The data models, it's going to be increasingly, we're going to maybe coming across some of these incidents, right? So what are we doing about it? Does your organization have a policy in place regarding the use of ChatGPT, right? But again, some of them are just common sense. We know these things are happening all the time, right? Someone loses a USB or hard drive, or they lose a laptop. There's something's happening on your websites, like through DDoS attacks, right? I mean, when I was at the hospital, we had a DDoS attack. So that meant we went out to get a web proxy after that, right? So some of these, again, this is an example of what I was saying before. Why didn't I do this before, that happened? I did have a joke. It was like, so I was talking to a guy once, and he was married twice before, and he said he was getting married again. And I said, yeah. And I said, well, it's very brave of you. He said, yeah, this time I'm buying the house and I'm giving it to her, and just to save all the drama. Anyway, so yeah, but that's exactly, you hear it again and again and again from even executives. If let's think it's already happened, and let's plan now, because when it happens, we're going to have to do that work anyway. And a real shout out to Ontario Health here as well, because they're really at the forefront now when it's coming to cybersecurity and setting those governance things in place, those policies, getting some of the real infrastructure things, tabletops and all that. So, we're all kind of citizens of Ontario regarding health. So they're doing a real shout out to them. I think they're the cutting edge regarding what's happening in the broader public sector right now. So, yeah, all the different scenarios. So, okay, got the different scenarios. So you have that. But I've talked about before, you have the multiple scenarios, but now think of double and triple extortion. So whenever you have one scenario, you may well be hit from a ransomware, but now it's not a matter of, I've got backups or whatever. Now they've exfiltrated the information, so now what are you doing about that, right? Or they've exfiltrated the information, but now they're saying we're going to bring your website down if you don't pay. So that's how things escalate regarding these now. It gets very complicated. So this is what we talk about. I've said extortion to the power of, right? It's just getting, you don't know what's around the next corner, right? This is how it used to be. Give me the money, I'll give you a decryption key. Double is, they'll exfiltrate the data, and then they'll expose it if you don't pay. And then the triple now is single, double, all that is like a given, and then they're adding DDoS to obtain leverage. So I'm not sure if you know about, it was just a few months back now, there was an Australian medical organization that got breached, and they went through all this, and then they started publishing personal health information on the website, right? So they're literally naming people, you know, and what procedures they had and things like that. I mean, these people. I come from a social work background. Yeah, I come from a social work background like 20 years ago, and I actually was in child protection back then, and I kind of transitioned into IT when computers started coming into the office, and I had a bit of a talent for it, and then it morphed into that. You really are in a great profession because every day you go to work, you're the good guys, right? You're the ones who are trying to protect information, protect people, right? It's a little bit more of a labor of love and a passion, right? Because these people, I mean, they're lower than the lowest, right? I mean, they're going after sick kids' hospitals, they're going after vaccination clinics, they're going after your mum, your dad, your grandparents, money. They'll take the last cent off you. And I find it really kind of empowering to know that, you know, you can do a little bit to stop that. Anyway, go ahead.
How important is attribution at this point?
Attribution.
So, for example, you said single extortion. So this is a type of threat that you might face. And when this happens, and let's say you realize some of your applications are seeing a ransomware note.
Yeah.
You realize some of your applications are seeing a ransomware note.
Yeah.
At that point, attributing it to a particular group that is leading this attack, or a particular organization, or a particular type
Yep.
of ransomware. How important is it to know that
Yep.
at this stage?
Absolutely. And that is why, this is my answer, but I think that is why you bring in third parties, right? Because if you bring a breach coach in, these people, it's not their first time at the rodeo. It might be your first time at the rodeo, but not for them. And that's why I was talking about the importance of negotiators and people like that. They know their MO, their modus operandi. They know how they work. They also know from these ransomware gangs whether they can push them for a lower ransom, right? Also, how much information are you giving over to these people? You don't go in there and say, you're actually saying, okay, well, send me the information that you have, or part of that information, because I don't believe you until you provide me with what you know of us, right? So the negotiators, and this is exactly why the attribution part is knowing your adversary, right? I'm reading books, I'm doing this kind of thing, but these breach coaches and people who are doing it day in, day out, they're the people who know it best. Leave it up to the experts. So that's my answer to that. I'd say it's really important, right? Because they all have a different modus operandi. That setup that they had before, where it's not just your lone wolf, but it's your whole office, right? Set up. That's why, right? Okay, so one of the things that I did regarding incident scenarios is that I integrated it into the service management of the organization. So I made sure that, just like you're, put a ticket in. I can't do any, help desk, right? Did you open a ticket? No, you got to open the ticket before I can talk to you, right? It's the same thing, right? Because they need something in a documentation in order to deal with that, right? So exactly the same thing. It's all a matter of, if you integrate it into your service management, you can integrate your incident scenarios into that as well, so that they come up now. Don't rely too much. That could just be for the initial detection from a help desk I'm talking now, and maybe a confirmation that it is a breach, because those systems may be down as well, right? But recording and tracking, right? Service management. Because when it comes down to your incident response steps, right? All these, and this is again why third parties are so important, because they know about chain of custody, forensics. It's not a matter of just turning off your internet, unplugging your internet, because they may come in and say, no, we want to see the behavior of this breach because it's giving us more information, right? So it's not a matter of cutting them off or even letting your adversary know that you have detected that, right? So there's a lot that goes into that. But again, when it just comes down to your computer security handling guide, that again, that is your NIST 800-61. Again, these are what we've talked about. And also what I've done here is, when it comes down to documenting stuff, I just did a template there. This is the sample of the scenario, right? So you're doing the scenario, you're doing the description of it. What's your preparation? What do you have in place, preparing you for that scenario or for that event? So make sure that you've got network policies in place, you've got certain processes and procedures in place. What do you have? I've got down there preparation, and then what you're doing about your detection and analysis, containment. Each one of those you can actually describe out on that. And then if you need to put an incident response plan, then you can document it like that. So that's really kind of like a quick slide on that one. Just bear with me a second here. One of the things about recovery and containment, so I'm not sure if people knew about, see, this is how ingenious things work, right? So now, very, very much, we talk about supply chain attacks, right? So really, there was a lot of, really came to light when we looked at the SolarWinds, right? So I'm not sure, SolarWinds is like it's a monitoring software, login and monitoring software. There's different parts to it that you can use. And then one of the actual thing that was hit was called the Orion part, the login. What happened there is that the adversaries, because we're in cyber, we're always saying patch. As soon as it comes out, update, right? What did they do? They hacked SolarWinds and hacked up the update. Right? So it's kind of so good. So that when you brought down the update and implemented the update, you were then compromised. Right? It was so ingenious, right? And so then that was only discovered by a company called FireEye, who were doing a really good audit of their company. And then they said, oh, this is happening, right? And it was a Russian-based group that did it. Now, everybody was kind of, right, you need to do this, make sure there's indications of compromise, et cetera, et cetera. So every night, so now you can see if you've been hit or not. I was just reading this book, and they were saying you can guarantee, this absolute guarantee, that that they've still got that compromise in organizations, the SolarWinds one. Because who knows if they left in a back door, right? We call it back door, right? Because this is one of the big things they do. They understand. They say, okay, they don't put their hands up, say, you've got me, fair enough, right? Fair cop. Take me away. No, they don't, right? They'll say they anticipate that, right? They anticipate everything, all your whatever cleanup. How good is your cleanup? And they'll leave a back door in. That's why you see companies being hit twice, right? They think you've done it and they'll go away. They don't. They just come back again because they've left a back door in, right? So and again, that book, the previous book I was reading, it talks about that recovery and the post-incident activities and closure that you need to do, right? Okay, so let's start talking about tabletops, right? So I've been doing tabletops for a few years now. We do some customized tabletops. Tabletops are coming, it's such an exciting area right now. There's lots of gamification of tabletops. There's software out there that there's companies that you can bring in to do scenario-based learning in organizations. It's really kind of booming because now, especially in the broader public sector, there's a real emphasis on incident management, but also on tabletops. The tabletops are basically testing and identifying testing your incident response plan, but also identifying any gaps so you can update that plan, right? So there's a lot of it when it comes down to your planning and your objectives of that tabletop. Who are you actually trying to target here? So I know you do tabletops, right? He's a master right here. I found when I've been doing tabletops, first of all, I'm saying, right, well, who are we targeting here? Are we targeting C-level chiefs, decision makers, or are we targeting technical people here? Or are we doing them both in one, right? I find that if you bring chiefs and technical people in, sometimes it doesn't work too well. You can do it over a staggered time, but if you're just doing it like maybe in a couple of hours, sometimes the technical people may be a little bit gun shy regarding saying things to senior chiefs and stuff like that, right? So you just got to pick how you're doing it, and then also part of your planning, right? It's all goals-based. It's all identifying gaps. I usually, we do a lot of customized tabletops. That means that we go to a ministry, and then we have a key contact in that ministry, and then we're asking them to provide the information, right? So we need to understand your technical environment, the systems that you're using, things like that. And then we build our scenario around that, right? So we'll pick a system to get hit. We'll do an escalation, like of events within that scenario. And yeah, so when we can, right? You know, when you get in C-level, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 months because you can't get these C-level people into one room, right? Because they're very, very busy people. And to even get 2.5 hours, fairly intense, can be really hard. So you've always got that key contact who's got the power to get the appointments in people's people's calendars, but also gives you the information regarding the technical people that you're talking to as well. Then you've got the exercise and conducting it as well, right? What the injects are. When we talk about injects, we usually have a number of different injects. So initially, you know, there's an initial maybe ransomware, there's an initial compromise, and then it escalates, right? So what we thought was just one computer becomes 10 computers or a department, right? You know, then it becomes, oh, if we contained it, that's okay, wow, okay, so, but now it's gone viral on the internet, right? So now we've got to deal with that. So, especially when you're dealing with C-level people, you know, they've got more strategic view of their organization, so they understand the impacts and reputational damage that a breach can do, and also they've got to be able to manage privacy, legal, and all those kind of different areas, right? And then once you do it, I mean, I've found it's usually they're very, very appreciative after, right? After they've done it. Because it's identified their gaps and no one's pointing fingers. And then you're providing them with reflection, lessons learned, and an after action report, right? So then you're hoping that they will follow up either with their incident response planning, contingency planning, and then also we have a few things that we do as well. We may target them on a phishing campaign after, you know, if the initial vector was social engineering, we'll hit them with a, you know, that's Josh. Josh does that back there. Yeah, I can blame him. So that's what we do. So we have kind of like a little program, right? So yeah, so we have. It's part of my responsibility and you know, part of our team that we have these things scheduled out, right? And then we also leverage external as well.
Good question. One thing that I've been struggling with, and because without naming the organization, we actually dealt with this.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
So yeah, the question that I have is, and it's something that I'm struggling with while writing a TTX for my team, and that is how to mimic a scenario where there's an insider threat.
Yeah.
Without, I can understand, I can do it like a disgruntled employee or something to that effect, but how do you actually play one of those or write a process in there such that you don't start to create, you know, suspicion within the organization? Because people come out of TTX games, if they run well, really, really moved in certain ways
Yeah.
to take action. And how do you deal with insider threats in a process like this?
I'm not sure I can talk about specifically insider threats, but it's like this presentation, right? You want to leave people a little bit nervous going back to their organization, especially if they're decision makers, about whether we do have gaps. Because everyone likes to think and believe that, their teammates or whatever wouldn't happen in bigger organizations or small, that their teammates wouldn't do something like that. But unfortunately, within these walls, this crime pays. It pays big bucks, lots of money, right? So, we only ever see people when they come in, walking through that door into the office. Well, when people come in now, we don't know what's going on in their lives, their liabilities, their everything. Someone comes along and then they can sell that information. They don't need to sell the credentials, right? Because then they can sell that on the dark web, because they know that they don't have to sell it to the hacker who's going to do everything. They just sell it to one of those, the affiliates, right? And that's it. They'll get money. If it's a success, they'll end up getting money for it. I mean, it's a den of thieves as well out there, right? So, but yeah, I mean, people have got to get nervous about this stuff. If that is a scenario which you've not thought about, please, make that a scenario. That's a good one for me, right? I mean, I don't think I had it listed there, so I'll add it for the next one, right? Insider threat. Okay, so here's quickly, just a list of stuff here, like schedule a kickoff, right? So you've built your scenario, you've had all the people, regarding when you're talking about. Well, actually, let me back up there. You're scheduling a kickoff with your key contact, who you have, right? And then you're understanding what the scenario is going to be, making sure that everything is aligned with their objectives, what they're looking at. We did one recently. We can't really say who we're doing these things with, but we need to make sure of their organizational goals, their mission statements, things like that, right? Some of the technologies that they're using. So we've got to make it very relatable, right? That's it, embedding realism into it, technical, business, and threat. Like I said before, it's not an IT issue. It's a business issue, right? You need the business people in there as well. So start with an initiating event that will create a sense of urgency, right? I mean, some of these gangs are very creative how to get the blood pressure up, right? So they can even do, once they're in there, they can just write scripts which will then print off a ransom note onto every printer in the organization. What does that do? It tells everybody that something's happening, right? So it can't be contained maybe within a couple of people until they take, so they can take action. It becomes escalated really quick. They know, like I say, they're doing this 24/7, 7 days a week. Timely injects that creates required attention and explore the issues, right? So, you draw people in when you're facilitating these. It's not until, you can start saying that you've had personal information which has been exfiltrated. Okay, so now we need to know the legal impacts of that. Who's the privacy officer? Who are you contacting within the organization? When are you calling the police? Under what scenario, right? Until you get people engaged with what they are, especially in communications. And then also understand you're maybe doing a multi-day event in just a few hours. So the paces can be fairly quick. You've got to keep the flow going. And then build the discussion points. So we're getting pretty good at it now, where we have, from our different injects, we're having best answer, kind of middle answer, and worst answer, right? So we're seeing those on our notes when we're facilitating, right? These are the things that we should have in their best response to this, right? This is what we may be missing if they don't, right? So it all helps when you're giving that feedback. And then sometimes you're pushing people along. Well, did you think about when are you bringing in communications? Okay, how often are you actually, as a incident response team, reporting up to your management on this? Is it every half an hour? Is it every hour? Is it every, understanding those things, right? Yeah, so this is really what I've done here. And this is really, we do an overview. We have an overview of a tabletop exercise, like a master events list we can do about what any particular event, and then, like I mentioned before. And then also, it's like this gives you something that you can look back on as well regarding how did that TTX go. You're giving good documentation regarding your TTX. You know, who was the purpose, who was the audience, what was the scope. Here's the scenario overview. These are the injects, right, and what they were, how many events were in those, and then participant list, everything like that, right? So these are some of the main people and responsibilities from a tabletop exercise. The facilitator, obviously. Then there's the participants. We have observers. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Do I need to go back? No?
When you
Okay.
were talking about the multi-day event,
Yeah.
when you're running tabletops, do you take that into consideration with some of your events and have like a shift change
Yeah.
with your secondaries?
What we do, we time slot. So we have event 1, 9 o'clock, 9 a.m., right? You know, we set the stage.
Right.
So it's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. You know, everyone's coming in, you know, on they've got their Starbucks, and then they turn on the computer, and then they see this.
Yeah.
Right? Then they have like a 9:30. Multiple people are now reporting and talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Then 10 o'clock, help desk is now confirming that we do have an event here, right? So you're kind of stretching that out, you know,
Right.
until it could be even the next day when things hit social media, say, something like that. But is that answering your question?
Yeah, when I run some tabletops as
Yeah.
well. And
Right.
I do the same thing. I do the time
Yeah.
lapse, but I try to incorporate or really drive home the fact that they are multi-day.
Yeah.
And, you know, your incident response team are going to be worn out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like I come from an emergency response background.
Yeah, yeah,
so
right.
CEMC type
Yeah.
arrangement. So you've got your secondaries. So I try to bring that in to educate them that, you know, you need to start considering backup staff, bringing food in, that sort of thing as well, that
Yeah.
they don't consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, like in your planning, absolutely that, right? I mean, at one time back in the day, they used to say for disaster recovery, you know, go and set up a trailer, right? During COVID, that's useless, right? I mean, all right, everybody get in the trailer. Okay, no, we can't do that, right? It's very, you know, you've got to be very responsive and relatable to what's things happening. And they are multi-day. I come from an operations background.
Yeah.
If you've got a server that goes down, it's not, you don't just click it back up again. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's what's happening, that people are drafted in
Yeah.
from different organizations to help out. So who are you going to be talking to for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So exactly, yeah. Hi.
Can you speak a little bit to how tabletop exercises may have changed a bit with fully cloud and fully distributed organizations?
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
Like across
So-
countries, et cetera?
All right, I've got about 5 minutes, I'm being told. They're scenario-based. So this is where you need to understand what your infrastructure is and your architecture and things like that. You need to understand the DNA of your organization. So certainly from a cloud perspective, you've got software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, whatever, right? So it absolutely depends on who's responsible. If I've got software as a service and I've got, say, Workday that's running and there's something goes wrong, it's all cloud-based. There's nothing local. So then that alters how you're dealing with that, but then what your backups are. You know, so that should be built in, right? If you're dealing with platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, right? It's different. You've got levels of responsibility that you're responsible for, right? So all that will be in your contract and your SLA with your cloud provider, right? Whether you're hybrid, etc. So yeah, absolutely, it's really important nowadays. Absolutely important, right? Because cloud providers, like insurance companies, they're only going to work to a certain point. not here. It's not free, right? Okay, let's just move on. Yeah, observers, very good. They can observe the progress, and then they can give information back. And evaluators as well, evaluating also the validity of it. Did you hit all the points that you meant to be based on the plans and objectives of your TTC? Participant guidelines. Go over that. It's very, it's like there's no wrong answer here. We're looking for gaps here, right? So that you got this. This is all that you can take away. Oh, that's it. But there's some recommended resources, right? Cybersecurity, Ontario.ca, make sure they've got some learning modules there. They're fantastic. They're about 30 minutes to take. You'll get a certificate there. There's 2 particular there. These events, community practice calls, just sign up for them. They're getting pretty popular, and then even look at the library here. We've already done them, we've had breach coaches in, lawyers, we've had Microsoft's Dart team in, all those kind of people. And there's alerts advisories, and then there's that cost management framework. And then, and then there's those risk frameworks. I just threw it in. So that was just a little bit of a graphic here, where it just shows a reference. And that's it. Thank you.